Hello, Evershear here. It's time for a new feature that I am attempting to do here called Book Reviews, where I do some reviews of some books that I've recently read or am currently reading. Tell you what I think, whether I like them, whether I don't like them. I got two for you today. The first book I'm going to review is one called The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History by Thomas E. Woods, Jr., Ph.D. Here's the cover, The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. And it is basically, as it says, it takes a look at American history from its beginnings all the way up until, I believe, about 1997. And it's written by this professor who graduated from Columbia University. It's supposedly done real well on the bestseller list. Got some things here. You think you know American history, but did you know the American revolutionaries were actually conservative? The Puritans didn't steal Indian lands. FDR agreed to send 1 million Russian POWs back to Stalin. Landslide Lyndon Johnson stole his first Senate race. The war on poverty made poverty worse. Hundreds of American liberals had secret ties to the Soviets. Now, you're probably thinking that this is, just some conservative slam against liberals, but actually he's pretty an equal opportunity offender, let's put it that way. I thought the book was pretty good. It's a fairly easy read, lots of good data. I didn't agree with everything he said. I probably agreed with maybe 60%, 75%, 60 to 75% of what he said. Even though if you read the cover information, it would kind of give you the impression that he's a conservative. But after reading it, I would say that the author's bias actually leans more toward being a libertarian isolationist, which I would get from reading the book. He goes through Revolutionary War, a lot of major events, some interesting things, one places where I would disagree with him, some of his things he talks about, World War I and World War II, that I would disagree with. And he's got all sorts of interesting things you never heard of before. He makes some pretty startling accusations, like he accuses Woodrow Wilson of being insane. Actually, and interestingly, he pulls this quote out from Sigmund Freud. Well, the author doesn't specifically say that he thinks that Woodrow Wilson was insane, but he takes, for instance, a quote from Sigmund Freud during Woodrow Wilson's lifetime, and basically Sigmund Freud apparently thought that Woodrow Wilson was crazy. So that's an interesting thing that I'd never heard that type of quote before. He seems to think that, again, sort of isolationist, some of the mistakes that we made in the past. But I do think he does reveal some good truth. It's a good light reading book if you want to pick up a few interesting facts. Although, like I said, I probably only agree philosophically with about half of his stuff, maybe. But he's pretty equal opportunity offender. But anyway, it's how many pages is it? Looks like it's about 250 pages. Fairly good size print, got little graphics and stuff like that. It's a pretty good book. I would recommend it if you're a history buff, especially. The average, non-history interested person, it probably wouldn't do that much for you. My next one I have not finished reading, and I'm actually only about a third of the way through the book, but I love it so much that I'm going to give it high reviews and probably recommend it to everybody. It's entitled From Homer to Harry Potter, a Handbook on Myth and Fantasy by Matthew Dickerson and David O'Hara. Here's the cover of it, From Homer to Harry Potter, Dickerson and O'Hara. And basically, it's taking a look at myth and modern fantasy as a literary genre. And it goes through, and let me just read you a quote here to sort of give you an example. from the author's note. When we originally conceived of this project, however, our purpose was only to provide a guide to modern fantasy literature. In particular, our initial goals were to suggest a few general principles for how to think about and understand the genre of fantasy, and to illustrate those principles by exploring some specific characteristic examples, i.e. selected works of a few well-known fantasy authors of the last few decades. This was motivated in part by a commitment from author Tom Shipley, who at the start of his book, J.R.R. Tolkien's Author of the Century, writes, quote, "The dominant literary mode of the 20th century has been the fantastic. Despite the truth of Shipley's words, not enough critical attention has been given to fantasy as a literary genre. We set out to write this book that would explore this dominant literary mode as a mode." And of course that's how they started out, but they ended up going like all the way back to Homer and just going through, defining what is myth, what is heroic fantasy, what is fairy tale, the differences, the similarities. One of the great sections I just read was the distinction between science fiction and fantasy, and which there are some very excellent differences that they pointed out. And it's just a really good book. I just picked it up. I'm all the way already a third of the way through, and I just can't put it down. So again, I can't recommend it enough. If you like mythology or fantasy, if you like literature and genre studies, this is the book for you. So those are the two books. And just by the way, of course, I'm not connected with these guys in any way, and I'm not receiving any financial inducements to make these reviews. So just some books that I happen to be reading and that I found fun. If you've read the books, make a comment down in the comments section. If you have some other suggestions of books that might be good for me to read, you can make those suggestions too. If you look on my main channel page, you can find out what types of genres that I like to read, so you can check that out and give me some suggestions. Thank you for listening, and I hope you all have a great day.